and welcome to the Spawdcast. My name's Carrie Hyde, and I'm your host and your pet's life coach. Today, I thought it would be really valuable for you guys to hear from somebody on the inside of the veterinarian world. So most of you know that I spent 12 years working for veterinarians as a veterinarian technician as well as a receptionist. And so I learned a lot there. And some things, are kind of stuff we don't really want to talk about. But sometimes your best source of information is from somebody that actually has worked there and been part of it. So it's going to be very good information for you to want to listen to and hear because it'll help you in making better decisions for your pets. So I'd like to introduce to you today Krysta Fox. Hi, Krysta.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Who's this with you?
This is Bruce Wayne, my Dark Knight, the reason for all that I do.
Bruce Wayne. I think that's such a good comment that you say the reason we do what we do, because a lot of times the decisions that we make and how our lives kind of change and go down these roads is because of whether it's an animal, a family member, our children, our friends, that something happens to them. It forces us in on a different path. And I think that from what I've learned from Krysta, that is kind of what happened. So Krystas, tell us a little bit about did you just come out of the womb saying I want to be a veterinarian technician?
Well, when I was young, I always had a passion for animals. I was horse crazy as a young girl, and always said that I would grow up to be a vet. Life kind of led me down some weird paths, and long story short, I ended up working for a small feed store in my hometown. And it kind of blossomed from there. Then I worked for a raw dog bone company, and then I worked at a natural pet food store. And the first natural pet food store I worked for really did spark my passion for pet nutrition and just learning that it was just a whole new world that I knew nothing about. And, the great thing about pet nutrition is you can see it in your animal. And then once you see those results, it just for me, it just was natural. It just stuck. And then when I started working there, we got a lot of technical questions that a lot of people couldn't answer. And I was like, I think I want to go into veterinary medicine, because I was always really interested in surgery and definitely not afraid of blood, vomit, anything like that. So I was like, I think I'll try being a technician. So it kind of it was a pretty natural evolution. I think it definitely was my life's path to work with animals.
So you went from a natural pet feed store to veterinary medicine.
To a very conventional clinic.
So that must have been, so I'm the opposite, right? So I went straight conventional because I'm way older than you, and that's all that was available back then. I didn't even know what the word holistic veterinary medicine was back in the day. And then I'm a crossover, but you had to struggle with something that you were probably really passionate about. How did that feel?
Well, when I went to the conventional clinic, they were willing to hire me with no experience, and that was great. But I did have a lot of experience already with pet nutrition. And when I told them that I fed my dog raw food, they either laughed in my face or told me that I was going to kill my dog. And I just went, okay, we're not going to talk about that. And, I just knew I needed to be there to get experience. And I it's not like I was always like, I'm going to leave this place, but I knew that my future was not long-term at that place. So I got a ton of awesome experience there, but it really did help me connect the two worlds, the conventional and the holistic, and see where this giant gap was in the middle, where it was like, when I did intakes for patients, I was not even asking people what they fed their dogs. And when I started to just make that personal choice, and I'm like, I'm just going to ask for my own curiosity since the doctors don't care. And they're like, why are you asking that question? It's not important. I was like, really? What these dogs are eating day in and day out isn't important?
Wow.
That was the big red flag. How are you guys not asking this? I'll never forget, there was a guy that was like, all my labs have these ear infections. They all got them. And I went, what do you feed? Well, I've always fed IAMs. And I was like, well, it could be the food. I'm not a doctor,
right? But
it could be the food. And that was the first time he had ever heard such a thing. He just thought he was going to come in and get his Otamax ointment and be on his way. And it was
same old. I know.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I could pretty much predict exactly what antibiotic or steroid was going to be prescribed to this dog before the doctor even went in the room.
Yeah.
Because it was just same thing, over and over and over again. It was like, how is this fulfilling to any of you? All these vets were so burned out.
Yeah.
So
burned
it
out.
was quite something.
That's such a good thing to talk about because, in 12 years of working for veterinarians, I always say this. I worked for a lot of vets, but I didn't work in a lot of vet clinics. I didn't want people to think I just shopped around, but we had a lot of vets that would come and work in one clinic, or someone would go on, 3 months of vacation and we would have relief vets that would come in. So I had an opportunity to work with an enormous amount of veterinarians over 12 years. None of them were holistic. And I got to tell you, in every clinic I ever worked in, there wasn't a single, when you fill out like, the weight, the temperature, the this and that, your intake.
Yeah.
Never did we ask what a dog ate. Never.
Yeah.
But
it's pretty much the standard.
Yeah, it wasn't even a consideration. Even dogs, which we didn't see a lot of, which is another whole interesting thing you might be able to talk about. We didn't see a whole lot of dogs with diabetes, but if a dog did have diabetes, they still didn't talk about diet. It was very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a lot of dogs with diabetes at the conventional clinic. I've seen less than a handful in the years that I've worked at the integrative clinic that I work at. We do ask what people feed their dogs. We ask what treats they feed their dogs. I mean, we go really in depth in those intakes and ask those questions because they're important, very important questions that oftentimes are a huge causation factor to what's going on with the animal.
Sure. So when you're back working at the conventional veterinary medicine, did you ever get the feeling that it was a rushed like the exams are rushed?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was a revolving door. Yeah. It was such a change of pace from the conventional to the integrative. And that was a huge factor. This was like every 15 minutes, there was an appointment. Like you had to get in and out. And it was just vaccines, antibiotics, steroids. You saw the same stuff, infections, allergies, just over and over and over again. And it was like, well, we got to get this one out. We have the next appointment waiting. And it was like really overwhelming sometimes. And they took walk-ins. So that was just another stressor, but it was absolutely like, just get them in and out. And I think that's actually a huge issue overall. And I think that's why vets do overprescribe antibiotics, is they don't have enough time to actually do a proper intake and investigate what's actually going on with the animal. So antibiotics are the quickest, safest bet for them to get these symptoms resolved instead of actually looking at, functional causes.
I had a veterinarian ask me fairly recently, she was thinking about coming out and opening her own veterinary hospital, and she asked me how I would go about it. She's not a young person, but she's newer to veterinary medicine. She goes, how would you do it? And I said, well, first off, my exams would be nothing less than an hour, and I would charge more for the exam and maybe not so much on the whatever I'm prescribing wouldn't be as high, but I would charge more for the exam because how do you take an animal who can't speak and find out what's wrong with him in 10 minutes when you're rushed?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So you're in Illinois, right? Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is that every pet you're seeing is the same problems in California. It's global, right? Ear infections, skin problems. That's the number one reason these animals are going in. What would you say the number one cause of ear infections are? Food.
Absolutely. No doubt. The one doctor I work with loves to say that ears and rears are food issues, which really they mostly are. I mean, if you look into just the dynamics of how that environment in the ear gets to that point, it's from an overabundance of carbohydrates in the diet.
Yep.
And you see it so often when you do transition those animals to a low carb, fresh food diet. Magically, those problems go away. Hot spots as well, big one, where it's like, the balance of the skin microbiome is totally screwed up because you're just throwing sugar all over this dog's world. Like, they got to get rid of it somewhere. Yeah. And it's coming out through their mucous membranes, through their skin, through their ears, all of that.
So I know it's weird because I'm not anymore, but you are a vet tech and I was a vet tech. So we see some of the similar things, and it's so great for me to talk to someone like you, because I always feel like, do they think this is just my experience? Because it's not. And I don't know if this has happened to you again, but because I'm much older, but we would have dogs come in that had such chronic ear infections, that had been on so many antibiotics and ate crappy food for so long, that I had vets that were actually sewing up their ear canal. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah. Or ear canal ablations. Yeah. It's pretty crazy when it gets to that point. A lot of Cavaliers, a lot of Cocker Spaniels, tend to come in that have had those surgeries done at that point. Because I'm sure, I mean, people unfortunately go to these holistic doctors as a last resort instead of what they should be doing, which was from the beginning. So you do see these like just nightmare cases of antibiotic resistance, like, what do we do at this point? But that's the great thing about, integrative medicine is like, there's so much more in the toolbox, and there is stuff you can do. You just got to give it a lot more time. People are so used to that instant fix. Like, give me a pill. When I tell people, I'm like, sometimes it takes as long as your animal has been sick to get them better. And people don't want to hear that. But it's like, well, do you want a long-term solution, or do you want short-term results with long-term side effects?
Yeah. It's interesting. Most people know I do a lot of nutrition consults, and when I talk to clients, I have to say only probably about 10% actually follow through. When I have a dog who has chronic ear infections and they've been on antibiotics their whole life, people will start, but they just give up so soon, and then the dog just goes the rest of his life. Has that been your experience in Illinois as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel that since we've opened our store and people have gotten word of mouth advice that we are very knowledgeable and reputable, it's gotten better. But still, when I tell people when they come in, like, my dog's ears are infected, or give me a spray for hot spots, I'm like, look, I have all these topicals. They're really great. But unless we address the food issue, you're going to keep coming back for this. And I really don't believe that's not, I mean, I say straight up, we're about fixing the root cause of the problem instead of just band-aiding this. I have many wonderful options to alleviate this problem while we heal your dog from the inside out. But please just stick with this. And a lot of them just are like, no, I just rather have the supplement. It's like, okay. I mean, it's just unfortunate. But it really is crazy how much word of mouth means to people. Because when you see your neighbor's dog go from like, oh, it was limping around the yard, and now it's bouncing all over the place. And, someone talks to their neighbor and they go, oh yeah, I went over there and I got, a CBD and a joint supplement, and I put them on fresh food and they're like a puppy again. That gets people to change their minds way quicker than anything I can say most of the time, which sucks.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunately the case. People want to hear it or see it right in front of them to believe it.
Yeah. I always say, like, I want to help the dog who's obviously uncomfortable, but I really want to speak to the puppy owners. Like, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
We really want, for any of our listeners, if you have a young dog, please, sometimes I just feel like I have to beg them to not get to this point, because those ear infections are painful and they're chronic. And I've personally never seen, I've seen, an ear infection clear up if the dog is young from a bout of antibiotics. And then if they get on the right diet, it never comes back. But I have never seen a dog go on, and he dies with an ear infection, is my point. Right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
They die with an ear infection, and it's horrible to die that way. It's painful.
Yeah, the puppy owners, when they come in, and especially with COVID, so many people have gotten puppies, and so many people that have never had a dog got puppies. We're just like, okay, let's just stop right here. Just have a quick chat about a few things. Yeah. And really the most critical thing I tell them is, look, because they go, oh, well, I'll feed them raw when they get older. It's like, no. You got to understand that you are putting the building blocks for the foundation of the rest of their life. What you feed them feeds their cells to grow and develop properly. You either put in good building blocks now and have a healthier dog long term, or you deal with the repercussions of building a dog from really crappy processed food. Yeah. So please, if you're going to do anything, do raw through adulthood. And then if you want to play the budget game or whatever, which I hate to even make these negotiations with people, but I'm like, please just feed your puppy fresh food, please. Yeah. Please, because you build a better dog from the start instead of having to go backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's actually a really good thing to say that to your clients because hopefully, because one thing is breaking the habit, right? People really like to just pour that quick little kibble into the
Yep.
bowl, and then that creates a lifestyle, right? I come home, it takes me 5 minutes to feed my dog, and that's my habit. But if you can create good habits in what it takes to feed a dog, so you're really smart to tell them, if you're going to have to feed kibble, can you wait until, it's kind of a little backwards, but you may be creating a habit for people where one day they're going to be like, oh, this is weird to just pour this brown stuff into a bowl. So you're smart to go that way.
I just had a client that was like, oh, I had to put my dog on kibble, and it was such a nightmare, like diarrhea all over the house. And she's like, I'm never trying that again. I was like, ee. But yeah, I mean, it's too, when people have these preconceived ideas about raw feeding, they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. My neighbor does it. It takes her hours. I'm like, no, this is just thaw and serve.
Yeah.
And one of these brands you can leave in your fridge for a week, and it actually gets healthier the longer it sits. And people are like, what?
Yeah.
All I have to do is just thaw out this little patty and give it to my dog. And I'm like, yeah, and you can have fun with it. You can add broths, but you don't have to. If you just do this, you're going to be doing better than 99% of dog owners out there. Like, truly you are. And people are like, oh, I didn't realize it was that easy. People just have these ideas about raw feeding that you just have to take simple steps and just, lay it out really simple. It's just thaw and serve. I'm not asking you to take apart a chicken carcass here, because that's what everyone thinks it is. And it's just so easy. It's so easy.
Yeah, it's definitely not hard. I mean, you can go there if you want, right? There's
of course
levels of, and that's kind of what I try to, and I want our listeners to know. If just talk to a nutritionist, we can get you better than what you're doing today. And that should be at least your goal, right? Just do better
absolutely.
than you did yesterday and get on that path. And when you start to see the health, benefits come out, then you'll understand why we're so passionate about it. So tell me a little bit about Bruce. How did he change everything for you?
So yeah, Bruce is let me grab a little Brucey here. Bruce is a very special, oh, that was a good little fart you did there.
Good timing,
very
buddy.
Special little pug. So Bruce, I got when he was a puppy, and he was happy, healthy, wonderful, very sassy for 5 straight years. And in 2015, my life had a couple nasty bumps in the road, and I think his body took a toll, to be honest. He started coming up lame. He didn't want to jump on things. Make a long story short, had his first herniated disc, had a surgery for it, did all right. And then 2 years later, lost the ability to urinate. And I had a second spinal surgery done because he developed something called an arachnoid spinal cyst, which is basically a pocket of cerebral spinal fluid that pools over the spinal cord and compresses it just like a bulged disc would. And so I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, where there was a disc specialist, and she performed the surgery. Unfortunately, he did not regain the ability to urinate, so I have to catheterize him twice a day. I have done that now almost 3,000 times.
Oh.
But he's, the spine feeds the body. So when you have a deformed or malfunctioning spine, eventually things start to deteriorate. So he's been in his wheels now for just shy of 3 years. So he did actually walk for a little while, but eventually he got weaker over time. He's suspected to have a condition called pug myelopathy, which is similar to, but not the same as degenerative myelopathy. It stays in the lumbar spine. So it's completely non-painful, won't travel up the spine and cause the awful things that happen with DM dogs. So he's, happy, has a great quality of life, but he is the reason that I really went into the veterinary field, that he sparked my curiosity about natural remedies and just how things worked and I just wanted to just learn more. I just wanted to know more, because there were so many times where I was like, why didn't anybody tell me about that? Yeah. Why didn't I know about that? So I was just like, I'm going to figure this out on my own. And I think the best way is to go into the veterinary industry. But when I was working at that first natural pet food store, a man and his wife came in the store, and this was shortly after Bruce's first spinal surgery. And we chatted a bit, and he's like, oh, you should take little Bruce to come see me. And I was like, oh, okay. And he left. And then my coworker was like, do you know who that guy is? like, yeah, no, I don't. He's like, that's Dr. Carl DeStefano. He's kind of a legend. Like, he fixes dogs that can't walk and, puppies that spines weren't attached and stuff like that. So I ended up I brought Bruce to Dr. Carl's, and shortly thereafter, I think Dr. Carl saw how passionate I was, and he said, hey, I need an assistant on Wednesday nights. Do you want to, chip in when we need you? And I said, sure. And within a few months, his wife asked me to work for her. That was when I started working at the conventional clinic, and she needed a technician one night a week. So they are really what really launched my whole animal career, because what they know in terms of neurology and just holistic options and ways to treat things that are definitely not the norm just inspired me and helped me so much with Bruce. They actually figured out I had Lyme disease, which was a huge hurdle. But is the reason that I can function now is because of them. But Bruce has led me to all these people and all these paths in my life. Without him, I'd be probably totally lost. Honestly, I don't think that I would have had the motivation, because I just wasn't very self-confident years ago in terms of my abilities and, my intelligence. And when you have that passion, something to drive you that you're just like, I need to know more, I need to help you. Yeah. It makes it so easy to learn this stuff. Yeah. It's so much easier when you have an inspiration like little Brucey, and he just is so resilient. He developed thrombocytopenia last year in late May. His platelets crashed a total of 5 times. Very, very stressful when that happens. And with thrombocytopenia, there's not a whole lot out there in terms of treatment other than putting the dog on steroids. And I tried and tried. I worked with Julianne Lee and every holistic option I could do without going on steroids, but unfortunately had to put him on steroids. But I learned a lot about steroids. For example, I learned that you could administer steroids transdermally. No one told me that. My dog's liver values shot up like crazy. And I was like, what do I do? I can't just take him off steroids. Got to do something. And I learned about transdermal medication, that it bypasses the first pass of the liver, and his liver values got exponentially better. I also started ozonating saline and doing all these crazy things for him. But the thrombocytopenia really pushed me to learn, because there are all these things that happen as a result of the thrombocytopenia, and trying to figure out the cause of thrombocytopenia is very hard as well, which, because I work with masters in applied kinesiology, we were actually able to figure out that this was some kind of bug and not an autoimmune issue. So we are at the tail end of it. He's on a very, very small dose of steroids, and he's on an herb that's been pushing this all out of him. But it's been an amazing journey, to say the least, in terms of what I've learned in the past 8 months because of Bruce. Again, just, he's always teaching me. Like, every single day there's something where I'm like, what does this mean? The tough part is a lot of his doctors are like, I don't know. Bruce is weird. Like, how his body seems to just take things on and just like go from one place to another. And they're like, I don't know why. It's just Bruce. I get that all the time from his team of vets. Are just like, it's just Bruce. And it's like, I know. So we all know that he's trying to teach us something in the end here, but it's incredible what he has done for me in my life. I'd be totally lost without him.
I'm sure he feels the same way, like, thank
I
God,
hope so.
Thank God he ended up on your lap. If you weren't who you were, and he was only to see conventional veterinarians forever, where do you think he would be right now?
Unfortunately, I don't think he'd be alive. Because of diet. I really think diet is a huge reason that Bruce is alive and thriving. I know that if he was being fed kibble, don't think he'd be around. When he had this neurogenic bladder, which is the condition that he has, that he can't urinate, I asked the conventional vet I still worked with at the time, I said, how long does he have? And he said, well, I've seen dogs with this live about a year. And most of the time, the reason they pass is from antibiotic resistant, from recurrent UTIs, because people either are feeding kibble and just breeding bacteria and nastiness in their dog's body, giving antibiotics over and over and over again, and not properly expressing their dog's bladder. I've pretty much fixed all those problems with catheterizing him. So I empty his bladder completely. I feed him a fresh diet. I make sure he's on every natural anti-inflammatory I mean, I went through crystals and issues with him. He didn't get stones, but he got crystals that I could like see coming through, and I had to address that metabolically, which is how I found a couple of the great herbalists that I know. Hyde and Rita Hogan have helped me with him. But dogs like him, no, and most people, I mean, I just unfortunately saw a Frenchie at the clinic I work at, only 5 years old, same problem as Bruce, and they were not willing to catheterize him, so they euthanized him. And I think, unfortunately, most people don't realize, I think catheterizing is quite easy. I don't think it takes a brain surgeon to catheterize a dog, and I plan on making a nice step-by-step video for people, but
oh, that's a good idea.
There's a group on Facebook called Wheelie Pugs, and it's all pugs with pug myelopathy. And it's a wonderful community, but there is no holistic mindset whatsoever. And these people are dealing with recurrent UTIs and antibiotic resistant infections, and that is what these dogs are generally passing away from. And it just kills me because I couldn't respond fast enough to all these people and convince them you need to get your dog on a fresh diet. Not to mention that most of these dogs are fecally incontinent and pooping all over the place. And it's like, if you were feeding raw, you'd be dealing with a lot less of that, I assure you. But you know, it's tough. And there's still a lot of research being done with his condition. So, I mean, some of the dogs live until their teens. It just depends on, you know, how this disease progresses for them. So
how old is he?
He's 10. He'll be 10. 11 in September.
And
so he's like 10 and a half.
He was diagnosed at what age?
He had his first back surgery when he was 5, just after he turned 5. Once he had the neurogenic bladder issue in 2017, that was where that was pretty much followed the timeline of a dog with pug myelopathy, is that they, you know, have a disc issue, then they lose the ability to urinate and have, you know, more issues down the road. So it does follow the timeline roughly. He developed it earlier than a lot of dogs do. Most pugs are in their senior years when their back legs start to go out and people start to notice lameness or spinal walking, which most people don't know what that is. They're like, oh, my dog's just really clumsy. It's like, no, your dog's back legs are doing their own thing.
We have a couple of pugs that come in that don't, same thing. We have a few of them. Yeah. So why do you think, you know, we have these vets coming out of veterinarian school that are so against raw, so against herbs, so against anything, you know, that a veterinarian would say to an animal lover, if you feed your dog raw, you're going to kill your dog. That's a strong viewpoint. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's the same origin as human medicine. I think it's a lot of purposeful miseducation by people that have a lot of money at stake. And big pet food has a lot of money at stake. And unlike the human industry, where there's laws and regulations keeping large food corporations from inundating the medical industry, there aren't really in veterinary medicine. So Hills, Mars, Purina can teach vets nutrition, and that's where they get their knowledge from. And it's a slow brainwashing. I mean, they give them free food all through college, and it's so obvious that it's just a matter of who's in charge.
Yeah.
And how there used to be 11 homeopathic colleges in the United States. And then once the Rockefellers came around and the Rothschilds, those all went away because there was money at stake. And I think that's unfortunately, there's not any money in homeopathy. There's not much money in herbalism. And vets, I think, you know, just like human doctors, there's only so much time they're in med school. And they're mostly taught how to diagnose. They're diagnosticians. They're not really functional medicine doctors. They're not taught, well, how does this happen? Like, you know, what's the cause of this disease? It's identifying the disease and then identifying the pharmaceutical that needs to be given to treat that disease.
Yeah.
I don't fault vets, and I tell people this all the time when they're angry that their vets don't know this or haven't told them these things that I've told them, and I'm just a vet tech. What do I know? Right. And they're like, well, how do you all know all this? And it's like, well, I work with vets that went beyond their normal course of education in just basic vet school and doing the minimum requirement of CE, continuing ed, every year. The vets that I work with have taken serious course loads and new certifications from objective learning centers that give them actual correct advice and just teach them how to look at things from a holistic point of view. And you don't have to be completely holistic to just look at things holistically and look at the body as a whole. A lot of vets diagnose based on a piece of paper. They look at blood work and they go, okay, well, you got high alk phos. Let's look for Cushing's, and not like, well, let's look at the dog as a whole. Does it have a pot belly? Does it have thin skin? Is it excessively drinking? Bruce had high alk phos, and he had super high cortisol in his urine. He looked like a Cushing's dog on paper. But fortunately, I worked with doctors that went, Bruce isn't a Cushing's dog. Yeah. He's got something else going on, which he did.
Yeah.
But that's the problem, is that these vets will just go off a piece of paper. It's quick. It's easy to go, okay, well, your dog's got high liver values. Let's put it on Denamarin and see how it goes. Not like, your dog has high liver values. Can we talk about the dog's environment, what it's eating? Is it exposed to any toxins? Do you use plugins in your home? None of those questions are asked. And it's just, it's insane to me, because vets could be spending a lot less time with the same animal over and over and over again for the same problem if they just did a little bit more work to dig and see what's actually going on in the home, because most of the time it is an environment or a food issue.
Well, I think part of it is also the fear of, being sued, right? So if I'm trained in veterinary school that I have to read this blood work and then I have to give the drug that goes along with it and something goes wrong, I've covered my butt, right? Because, and that's the same reason we see these prescription diets being given, because I've covered myself. I have this prescription diet, which I don't know when rice and chicken has been a prescription, but apparently it is. You can't just go get it at the store. But I think a lot of times that's what happens, is that they're so afraid of being sued, and so they need to find these things that back them up. And so I also tell my clients, don't be mad at your veterinarian, because it takes, you either have, I know Dr. Josie Bug, when she went to vet school, she already had the mindset of holistic. She actually, I don't know if you know who she is, but she was like, I was in the dean's office all the time, because she wanted to say, wait, what about cause? And they were like,
that was
no.
like Dr. Becker too.
Yeah. And so, a lot of these vets either go in already with that mindset, or they come out, and I know a lot of these as well. I know a couple of vets down in San Diego that came out and went, God, I'm not really curing anybody. They're all just coming back with the same symptoms and same problems. But until you find the veterinarian that has either started as holistic or came out and went, I'm not making it, then they're just not on that right path. And you got to get to that path. I've often said that vet school is very cult-like, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I give explanations for vets, or excuses, is that
even vet tech school is cult-like.
Oh God, I got to tell you, the vet techs, we talked about this before this, the vet techs are my hardest battle. They are, I've been kicked off of Facebook groups for simply stating, your dog's having seizures, maybe you should stop the flea medication, and before you know it, I'm evil. But I think what happens too as a defense for vets is, if you think about it, it's really hard to get into vet school. If it wasn't, I'd probably be in vet school. If it wasn't expensive and hard to get into. But it's hard to get in, right? Then you spend all this money in there. It's going to be really hard for you to come out and go, all that money and everything I learned is not right. So it takes a special person to be able to step out of that and change what they spent a lot of money learning how to do. And it's not invaluable, right? We need...
No, right. You need that. That's a tool. It's one of the tools in the toolbox. But the one vet I work for, that's exactly what happened to her. She was, I think she said 7 or 8 years in, and was looking for an antibiotic and a steroid to give to a dog with allergies, and just went, there's got to be a better way than this. There's got to be something else. And that was what led her on her holistic path. So I think it's just a matter of them having that moment to think about it. And I think, the overwhelming caseloads that vets have, sometimes they don't have a moment to stop and think about their lives, because they go from work home to their family, back and forth, and it's just, a hamster wheel. So I think a lot of them don't even get to that point. They're like, well, how would I find the time to take another certification? I mean, I saw vets like that all the time that brought their kids to the clinic because they didn't have anybody to watch them because their kid was sick. And it was like, oh, this is a lot. I can see how you guys are all burned out. I give them a ton of credit for what they do. It's just, you got to have definitely that certain mindset to be like, I want to figure out a better plan.
Yeah, I think that vets would do really well. And even back when I was a vet tech and you just saw all of the patients, I think it's for our listeners, you're better off at that vet who isn't trying to just take so many clients, because how can they possibly, you want to go to the vet who's not seeing these dogs every 10, 15 minutes, who has a limit of how many patients she's going to see in a day, not just keep taking everybody who walks in the door. And as much as when we find those great vets, I know some of the greatest vets like Dr. Katie Kangas, who's down in San Diego, you can't get in to see her. But you know what?
Yep.
If you are a patient of hers, you are very fortunate. And so if we can get more of those, we can all be fortunate. But it is really hard. And it just breaks my heart to see all these animals that aren't being given a vet that has all these tools, right? And that's really all we want, is we want to open up your toolbox and put some more tools in these veterinarians' tools. But as a pet parent, what advice would you give a pet parent when choosing a veterinarian?
I think just an easy criteria is whether they do titers or not. If your vet doesn't do titers or discourages titers, find a different vet. That's a dead-on sign that you're going to be going down a path of not well-being. If your vet is against titers or doesn't know what they are or claims that they're not evidence-based science, which according to the Small Animal Hospital Association, they are.
Yeah.
So that would be the first criteria for sure.
Krysta, for our listeners, can you explain to them what a titer test is?
So basically, a titer test is a very simple test that involves your vet just drawing some blood and sending it out to a lab, and that lab will analyze the amount of antibodies your dog has in regards to specific viruses like distemper, adenovirus, parvovirus. And when they measure those antibodies, whether or not they've titrated down to a specific number, just give you a positive or a negative, depends on the lab. A positive is a good thing. And positive means that your dog does have measurable antibodies to that virus, which would signal that your dog does not need to be vaccinated. So as opposed to most results in the vet world, that positive is not a good thing. Positive for titers is a very good thing, and it means your dog does not need to be vaccinated. It's a very logical, sensical thing to do for our animals because they are so over-vaccinated. It's a simple test. I mean, any vet can really do it. It's just a matter of whether they understand how to do it. If they send out, certain labs are more expensive than others. I help people generally do it through Dr. John Robb, and he sends out through Kansas State University. He just does it very affordably. So it's a very easy, simple way to avoid over-vaccinating your dog.
That's a perfect example of it. Can we run titers for every vaccine?
No, not every vaccine, because certain things just, I mean, I don't think the technology is there yet. I think it's getting there. I mean, there's a titer for like lepto, but it's not very reliable.
Right.
It's basically for the core vaccines. So you can get a rabies titer depending on which state you live in. It depends on whether your state actually recognizes that or not. I think it's a nice thing to have on hand just in case. Like Bruce can't be vaccinated because he's way too compromised,
right?
But I still do a rabies titer on him just to be a responsible owner and know that he is protected and that at least I have some kind of proof.
Yeah.
And then the other vaccines that titers are widely available for are distemper, adenovirus, also called hepatitis, depending on who you talk to, and parvovirus.
Right.
So those are the main ones, and those are the core vaccines that most veterinarians demand your dog has. Rabies is obviously the one that's most legally required, but most vets want some kind of proof that your dog is up to date on their distemper vaccine, which is not just distemper. It's a series of either 4 or 5 all into one shot.
Right. So if we, like for boarding facilities, sometimes they'll accept a titer test, right? If they can, if they are allowed to. Some kennels, they're depending on the state or even the county, actually, it comes down to what they require. But sometimes that's what a titer test would be great for, right? If you can get your boarding facility or your groomer or whoever it is to accept a titer test instead of accepting it. Unfortunately, I know here in California, we can't accept a titer for rabies, even for anything. I even if I want to, I couldn't in order to keep my kennel license. But most people don't know that boarding facilities like mine doesn't require a Bordetella vaccine, for example. So Bordetella isn't one we can run a titer for. But
No, because it's like the
hopefully,
common cold.
right. So hopefully if you're boarding your pet somewhere, you're boarding somewhere where they're not going to force that vaccine on you anyway. So it wouldn't matter. At least that's something, my little plug there is find a boarding
I mean,
facility
I
that
love
doesn't
to
require
tell
it.
people when it comes to Bordetella, like, do you know that the leading veterinary immunologist, like super traditional dude, said Bordetella is not a vaccinatable disease? Because it's not. It's not. It's not. It's just it's one of the most nonsense vaccines, but is one of the most commonly required. And I see it all the time where a dog gets the vaccine, and this isn't like, oh my God, you're totally BSing. No, the dog gets the vaccine, sheds it into the kennel, and then everybody gets kennel cough.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's just so annoying. That vaccine just drives me nuts.
Well, I own a boarding facility. You have no idea. You can't come in if you're we have a 2-week waiting period. You cannot come in if you vaccinated your dog for Bordetella. Period. I don't want it shedding in my environment.
It's such a headache.
And I talk about Bordetella more than any vaccine out there because it's the one that I'm mostly don't want animals getting. And yet, no matter how many times I tell clients they don't need to get it, their vet talks them into getting it. So I encourage,
when you can literally like treat kennel cough with Manuka honey.
I know, honey. So, but Titers are another, right? We have diet, we have all of these things that we can do to help keep our pets healthy, and vaccines are obviously one of them. And we have a tool in our toolbox to both protect our animals from being over vaccinated and the disease itself, right? So neither one of us, I think that you should never give your dog a parvo vaccine.
No, absolutely not.
But we have a tool, and it's called a titer. It's a test we can do to make sure we don't over vaccinate our animals for it. And why do you think veterinarians don't use that tool? Do you think they're taught about titers in vet school? I mean, why not use that
Not
tool?
that I'm aware of. I think they're either not taught about it or they haven't read the updated guidelines from, I have only by choice. The conventional clinic, they just left the AHA guideline, the book that they got for that year, which is about 1 inch thick. And I went through it, and it says, plain as day, titers are evidence-based medicine. They are acceptable.
Absolutely.
But most vets don't read that, or they don't want to accept it because it is new information that is contradictory to their belief system currently. And even though they're doctors and they should be on the forefront of science and medicine and what's currently going on, titers are one of those things that interferes with their revenue. And I was yelled at this by the manager of the traditional clinic that I worked at. I posted a Dr. John Robb video on my own Facebook. Had a couple coworkers that were friends with me on Facebook and tattled on me. And I was told straight out, do not post stuff like this because vaccines are our bread and butter.
Oh.
And I just looked at her and I went, okay.
Wow.
And then I could really see what was going on. I was like, that's really sad. Because the thing is, the vets that I work for are booked for months out, and they don't vaccinate the crap out of animals. So there are other ways to bring revenue into your veterinary office if that's what you're worried about. There are plenty of other ways. So I think when it comes to titers, it's just, again, that miseducation or that unwillingness to understand them or take the time to actually be like, oh, okay.
Well, it's not just the time that the veterinarian has to learn and educate, but it's the time to, if my client has been going to all these other vets and they give the vaccine, now you come to me and I have to re-educate you. Some people I don't have time for that. Can you just vaccinate my dog? So it's on both sides, and it really takes the pet parent to want to educate themselves as well. I had spoke with, I had a conversation with Dr. Jean Dodds a while ago, and she travels all around the world talking about titer tests and vaccines. Of course, she's one of the leading vaccine experts in the country. And she said that after one of her lectures, she will have a line out the door of veterinarians say that they can't do that because, like you said, it would ruin their practice financially. And so, and she says to them, I have a practice that is very successful, and I run titers, and I don't over-vaccinate. So I disagree, and this is what she tries to tell them, is you're incorrect. And so if there are any veterinarians listening, I would encourage them as well to understand that that's simply not true. It is not going to ruin.
Well, and it's funny because actually I've seen the opposite of that, where people say, well, my vet said that the titers are too expensive, or my vet quoted me $250, so I'd rather just do the vaccine. And it's like,
Wow.
So if revenue is more important, why wouldn't you try to convince them to do this?
Yeah.
If that's what's going on, but it's just an easy, again, to get them in and out and not have to do a lot of explaining. It's just like human doctors. There's great doctors and there's
Right.
okay doctors and there's bad doctors. It's
Right. Well,
just like any profession. So
the revenue
you gotta
from
choose a better one.
I know. The revenue, though, from the vaccine isn't always about the revenue from the actual vaccine, right? So we used to have vaccine clinics. I mean, they were cheap back then. I can't even remember. Like, you could get a 5-in-1, the distemper, the parvo, all of them for, like, I swear, like $10, I think it was. That wasn't where the vet was making money. The vet was making money because he got you in there once a year. And when you were there, you also had an ear infection, and you also needed this, and you needed that, and you needed this, the Hill Science diet, and you needed all this stuff. So the vaccine is really your lost leader kind of thing. It's not always so. And a titer test.
They're due.
Right.
They're due.
Here's your postcard. Here's your postcard. God, I stamped a lot of those in my days. Which I'm sad to say now. I'm like, oh God. But getting them in, once a year, or now it's, fortunately for us, we've been able to do it, is a lot more than, and the titer is the opposite of that, right? If you find out that your dog doesn't need this, when am I going to see you back in my office again?
Yeah. That's the thing. I think these vets just need to see it. Like the integrative practice I work at, we're booked all the time, and we perform titers every single day and tell people, yep, your dog doesn't need another titer for another 3 years because it's that strong of a positive.
Yeah. We
still see those people plenty. There's the reality is, at this point, you don't need vaccines to get animals in a vet's office. There's so much toxic stuff in our environment. They're gonna come in.
Right.
There's gonna be a problem, unfortunately. No matter how great of a dog owner you are, the best you do, you still have to go outside and breathe air and walk on salty streets in the winter like we do here.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a health issue at some point. So vets just need to realize, like, just let go of the vaccine issue. It's just such a programmed thing that needs to just be backed off a little bit. It's so crazy.
I know. It's sad, really. It is. So
it's just like, Julianne was just talking the other day on an awesome Q&A she had with Podega, but she said, in the human industry, we have backed off from antibiotics a ton. We don't want to prescribe antibiotics anymore. They have signs in the ER that say we're not going to prescribe antibiotics for colds and viruses. But in the veterinary industry, they haven't caught on to that. They put antibiotics on everything before even knowing what the hell they're treating. I mean, I see it all the time. I mean, metronidazole was doled out like candy at the conventional
I
clinic.
was just going to ask you, because we're going to have to wrap it up here a little bit, but if there was one drug that you think is, you probably already answered it.
Yeah, it's metronidazole.
Overprescribed, what would it be?
It's metronidazole. No
I
doubt.
agree with you.
No, I didn't even know what metronidazole was until I worked at that conventional clinic, and I probably gave it to my dog in the past and just didn't know. But it was like, I just thought, oh, this is just what you give for diarrhea.
Yeah.
I had no idea until I worked with Dr. Carl and his wife how powerful metronidazole was. They were like, ooh, we really don't want to use metronidazole unless it's really a last resort. This stuff really wipes out the gut. And it wasn't until they said that I was like, oh, it does? Because they acted like it was candy that had no ill effects.
Yeah.
Dogs were given it over and over and over and over again. And I mean, I still see people come in my store that's like, yeah, as soon as we go off it, the diarrhea comes right back. It's like, do you think that it's the cure or possibly making things worse? Like, it's insane with metronidazole.
It is. I agree with you. I have, I get to see, because I'm a boarding facility, so I get to see everybody's, they bring in their whole receipts with all their vaccines and all their stuff. And I can literally tell a dog's future off of what he got done as a puppy. And I know it. I know exactly, he's, 6 months old and he's already been on metronidazole twice. That's it.
Yeah.
There you go. Yep. I already know where we're going with that. But it is a quick fix, sort of, right? It fixes it day 1, day 2. It seems like it's all great, but it will come back. It will always come back, and it's heartbreaking. But I also understand.
When I see puppies that have been on it, like you said, like series of it before they're a year old, I'm like,
before they're a year old.
We got some work ahead of us now.
I know. Yeah, and then trying to get them back. I have a client right now, and she loves this dog so much, but the stress is, I think the stress, and that's, what bothers me the most is when we have people like you and I who are educating ourselves, and we've seen it inside and out, and we know what the problem is, and then we have these clients that we talk to and we want to help them, but then over here their vet is telling them different. We're vet techs, not veterinarians, so we usually lose out. And then, the pet owner is stressed. And I just had a client just recently, and, I told her, ultimately, the stress that this is causing you and your pet isn't going to allow her to heal anyway.
Exactly.
So if you have to go that conventional way to get your pet off of all of the stress, I don't like metronidazole, but she ended up doing metronidazole because she could not get the stool and this stuff under control.
There's certainly times again where those tools are necessary. It's just not going to them as the first route, going to them as the last route.
Yeah.
And it's switching that mentality up where it's like, let's try something natural first that's not going to harm the dog. If it's not a life-threatening situation, let's try something a little less rough on their body.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt. We
can do it. We just have to be patient in time, right? So we're going to have to wrap it up. But before we do, I want to make sure everybody knows about your store. So Krysta decided, I'm going to help people one way or another. God willing, this is going to happen. So she opens up a store. Tell us about it.
So I opened up my store. I partnered up with my fiance, who I just met working with one day, and we both had a mutual passion. And we actually originally were going to start a little doggy food truck. And the logistics of it were kind of weird, but we were trying to figure out what we wanted to put on the truck. And Jeff, my fiance, and my partner said, well, what if we were like a doggy GNC? And the light bulb went off, and I was like, that's what I'm all about. I have tons of supplements. I'm supplement crazy. And I was like, I want to be able to have these on the shelf so other people can get them and know how to use them. I want to be a fruitful yield rather than a GNC, because I don't like synthetics. But
that's okay. Yeah.
I want to be a fruitful yield for animals.
Right.
I want to have criteria and stick to my guns about why we carry this and why we don't carry that.
Yeah.
And so that's how Bruce and Willie's was born. Half of the store is a wall of supplements, and the other half is super, super clean treats and fresh food.
Awesome.
We got pretty much no synthetics, no flours, sugars, salts, dyes, no glycerins in any of the treats we carry. Everything is super clean because I'm helping people address serious health problems, and I don't want to contribute to that inflammation.
Right.
I want them to still give their dogs treats and have fun with them, but in a healthy, safe way. So we are very strict about what we bring in the store, but once people understand that, they respect that. And they come to us for help when they need other options. And that's usually what I tell people. I want to give you these other options before you need them. So when you are in that vet's office and they say, yeah, your dog has a UTI or has a ear infection, you can go, you know what? I'm going to try this herb first, because that's exactly what I did with Bruce. Bruce had coccidia. Yeah. And they're like, here, we'll give you a dewormer. And I was like, no, I know about this product called Cocci-Free. Yeah. I'm going to try it. Yeah. And fortunately, I worked with a vet that was like, sure, let me know how it goes. Yeah. And sure enough, it worked. And she carries it in her clinic now.
That's awesome.
Because it does work.
And it didn't destroy his gut.
Nope, it sure didn't. Yeah. So that was why I was like, I want to have these things so that people can have them on hand and not just go online and get lost. Because you can get lost with dog supplements now. There's a lot.
God. There's a lot of them.
The problem is most of them have great active ingredients, but it's looking at those inactive ingredients because, for example, joint supplements are notorious. Having wonderful actives, inactives are full of sugar, molasses, glycerins, dyes, artificial preservatives, nasty stuff that will not help your dog's overall inflammation levels in the end.
Right.
So I am also very picky about that. So what we have is I think the best of the best. And as I go, I learn more. I've pulled brands out of my store because I don't trust them, or I've learned something that makes me go, nope, you're not going to cut it. So Bruce and Willie's is all about helping people learn, giving them knowledge, giving them resources and tools.
Good. Do you do can people call you and just talk to you about things? Or I know we talked about it and I want her to do more consultations. So
yeah. And that's the avenue I'm going down at this point, because I spend a lot of time with people and I want to be able to dedicate that time more appropriately rather than you just coming in the store and maybe catching me at a time where I have 15 minutes to talk. I'd rather sit down and consult with you and really go over everything instead of being like, oh, I forgot to tell you about this because we didn't have enough time. So we're now going towards that consulting route now that we've built up a bit of a reputation.
Good. And you're in Illinois, so not everybody can get there, but can they reach you through websites or how?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
So our website is bruceandwillies.com, BruceandWillys.com. Our phone number is 630-465-0727. And all of our information is on the website. There's more things I'd like to add, but yeah, our Facebook page, you can get a hold of us just about any way. And I'm more than happy to ship out anything that I have in store. I can't ship frozen stuff, but anything I have sitting on the shelf, I'm more than happy to consult with you and ship out to you.
Awesome. So I'm going to have to let Krysta go because we're running out of time, but I want to make sure our listeners know a little something about Krysta. And I've been trying to let you know that we started a Facebook group called Millie's House, and Krysta so graciously decided to come on board with us and be an admin. So if you have questions, you can also reach out to us there. It's something new. We're growing. We're hoping that it'll be more of an educational thing, not kicking people out for their opinions. And it really came from me getting kicked out of so many groups trying to help people. And I thought, I'm not going to have a group like that. I want us to learn and grow together and educate. So we have Rita Hogan just decided to come on, so she's on. So we have a couple of herbalists. We have now 2 vet techs on there, myself as well, a couple of pet nutritionists. So there's a lot of information you can get from there too. So Crystal will be on there. But I really encourage you, if you're having problems, to reach out to Krysta. All of her information will be in our show notes as well as our website, which is avaspa.com. And you'll be able to get a link to Krysta through there as well. So I encourage you guys to do that. Krysta, thank you so much for shining a little bit of a light on what goes on in veterinary hospitals, because it's really hard. You know, people come in and they meet their veterinarians and they think they're nice, and they are nice. I'm not saying, and who would go to the mean veterinarian, right? You know, I go to this one because he hits my dog. That doesn't happen. They're all very nice, but thank you for letting us know, and in a good way. Like, I don't think Krysta and I, either one of us, we don't think they're bad. No. We just think that they aren't on the road.
They're human. Right. They're just human. They just see things in a certain way.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you go, but is there any last minute things you want to say?
No, but thank you for having me. I'm honored to be part of your group and be on this podcast and just continue to help educate pet parents and have them be more empowered.
Awesome. Great. You are absolutely helping us get them more empowered. So take care. Have a great day. Give that pug a hug.
You too. I will. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you for joining us and always being willing to help find more information that can keep your pets happy and healthy. You can always reach out to me if you want to do any kind of consultations. I love being your pet's life coach. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as following us on any of our Facebook groups. You can now join us at Millie's House, which you can get any information there. You can type in a question there anytime and we can answer to you. So thank you all for being here. Take care. Bye.